Um, there's probably going to be some more people filtering through. So whilst we're sort of waiting, Fletch, do you just want to give everyone an overview of what you are, what's the plan for the day, and so on?
Yeah. So, I mean, last week we did a little session, and that was just on some techniques, sort of centered around warm up, and also we did a lot of work with talking about the exhale. So when we were breathing out, what that feeling was, what we might use that for in terms of anxiety or pre-performance arousal, and how we could influence that and some different sort of breathing techniques. I introduced myself. I'm a physiotherapist, and I'm also an exercise physiologist. And I started breath work about 11 years ago now. And that started in performance. So it was helping Cirque du Soleil athletes perform better. And at the same time, my mum was diagnosed with COPD. So being a physio, I had to come up with some breath training to improve her functionality. So her ability just to walk up and down a flight of stairs and mop floors and do things like that. So that's what we sort of did last week, just checked in with who I am, what I've done in the past. Today, we're just going to run over a little bit of the stuff that we did last week. We're going to check in with our numbers again. And then we're going to talk about this idea around the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic systems. We're going to do a breathing technique that shifts us into the sympathetic mode. And that comes from sort of like a pranayama practice. Like I said last week as well, I haven't come up with any new breathing techniques myself. I just study and train under lots and lots of people. I work with lots and lots of different athletes and try and pick up things from an individual level, also from a sporting level, and adapt those for people's individual needs. Then we're going to talk a little bit about research and how I've used that in the past and why that makes a difference for us in performance. And then we're going to do a practical session around the parasympathetic system. So this idea of rest and digest, we did touch a little bit about it last week as well. And we're going to see if we can see some physical changes within the body when we shift it from a sympathetic mode to a parasympathetic mode. All right. If anyone has any questions, can they just flick in the chat there, Rich?
Yeah, they can, yeah. But Stuart, just want to hash out, just in case someone doesn't understand, what is the parasympathetic nervous system and what is the sympathetic nervous system?
Yep. So the question was around sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. So in generally, if we're stressed, what happens is our muscles become tight, our blood pressure increases, our heart rate increases, and we're ready to, fight the bull or run away from the robber, and that's an acute sympathetic response. But what we see a lot, certainly in my field, is this sort of more chronic sympathetic response where people get stuck in this state of sympathetic drive, where they have a high blood pressure all the time. They're always on edge. They kind of feel like they're I talked last week as well about my trigger is my shoulders. If I can get my shoulders nice and relaxed and push them away, that's my personal trigger. We discussed triggers last week in terms of, when we were breathing out, when we were finding where that first sign was for you guys at home. Where was that coming from for you guys to take a breath? Was it in the throat? Was it in the tummy? Was it in the chest? And then the parasympathetic mode is rest and digest. So what we try to do and where the research sort of stops for us, as soon as it starts to move into this idea where I guess the breath can become more esoteric, it's very challenging to get actual research data around that. And what we see all the time is, let's say I take a bunch of athletes into the pool and we do this really intense breathwork session. It's really high intense. And then I don't let them go home after with some parasympathetic breathing. Like I always finish my sessions with parasympathetic breathing. If I don't do that, they don't sleep properly. They don't feel hungry when they get home for dinner. And they're generally restless. So this parasympathetic mode is a mode within the body, or it's a nervous system within the body that controls our digestion. It also controls our heart rate. And if we can tap into that and play with it, then we're winding down, we're resting, we're recovering, we're digesting. It's time for sleep.
Which there's two questions in the chat there. I don't know if you can see them. One's from Trish and one's from Sarah. If not, I can read it out.
Yeah, so the questions are, so if I'm working with people on digestion, parasympathetic using this technique, a great add-on. That's from Trish. So I'm working with people on digestion. So I'm guessing these are disabled patients or patients with challenging nervous systems. But yeah, if we're stressed all the time and we're in the sympathetic mode, then when we're not going to be able to digest properly. If you are working with digestion, then I would certainly try and shift these people to parasympathetic mode, and that'll be the second practical that we do today. And it's actually based off a Buteyko method. So Buteyko is a chiropractic method of breathing, and it's very popular at the moment, and a lot of people have used that in order to slow their breathing rate down. But it's actually centered around carbon dioxide retention, right? We can talk a little bit more about that. The second one, will decompression breathing come into play? I don't know what decompression breathing is. They might be called something else.
So do you want me to, so if you want me to, I can unmute you if you want to ask a bit more, or you might be able to.
I don't know very much about it, but I've seen where people do it where their ribs kind of like really protrude and they're doing some kind of breathing technique. So I'm not sure if it's called decompression breathing, but.
Is that when they suck their stomach up? You see them like.
Yeah, it looks like they're sucking their stomach up and they're like they're pulling all their air into their like rib area.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. So we won't do any of that today. That's it's a pretty high level move, and they look at it. A lot of it's like diaphragm stretching or control of the diaphragm. If you have better control of the diaphragm, you can inhale more, or you can take more air in. I do that in one-on-one sessions because, when I first started out 11 years ago, my first sort of technique that I got involved with was inspiratory muscle training. So that was it's a pretty big load on the system. It's like taking the breathing muscles to the gym. And I was just playing around with it. I sent my mates home with it really high. And then we had this diaphragm spasms. And when someone has a diaphragm spasm, it's not a fun thing to go through. And physio and exercise physiologist, and I was watching my mate curled up on the floor, So that technique we're talking about, it's like a diaphragm stretch, to make it more functional and to tap into that muscle. I do a diaphragm stretch a little bit differently. I can certainly show you guys towards the end the way I stretch my diaphragm. The diaphragm's connected all through the thorax, so it's connected here. It's connected in the lumbar spine as well. So I put myself into a position and then I breathe certainly, and I can definitely feel my diaphragm stretch. So that's probably a beginner's diaphragm stretch. That one that you're talking about there, the decompression breathing, is like a high level diaphragm stretch.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. Just can someone remind me to do that at the end? Or Rich, you got a good brain?
A good brain with bad memory, but I'll try.
All right. So should we kick off?
Sounds good.
Yep. So what I wanted to do is start off with, last week we sort of went through the sessions and we were talking about this negative number, and what I mean by that is when we just exhaled all our air and we were sitting there with the breath and we were listening to the body, and we wanted to listen to the body when it gave its first signal to take a breath. And that signal for us, we were counting in our head and we were going, okay, that's my signal of arousal level. I don't know. Has anyone done that? Has anyone done their homework at home? Has anyone got a number that they're familiar with in that space now? If you want to type it into the chat box, but we're going to do it now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a certain breathing technique, and then we're going to do it again. Then we're going to do another breathing technique. Then we're going to do it again and see how we can influence those numbers. All right. So where we're headed towards this versus the sympathetic versus parasympathetic modes, and where sort of my first research, the research articles on this first stimulated my brain, it was there was this article that came out. This is by a group in the UK, Craig Harms, and this was in 1997 that he released this article where they got people on a cycle ergometer. So they were in the lab, they were on a bike, and they were just pedaling along. And what they got people to do was, first of all, just breathe normally. So they attached them to a hose, breathe them normally. They were measuring their gas exchange. The second time they did that test, they made the breathing easier. So they were breathing through the hose, and when they initiated the breath, they forced air down their lungs. What that did was reduce the work of breathing by about 50%. So they made breathing easier. And some of the things I mentioned last week was that's all I want to achieve. I want to make breathing easier for the individual. Okay. And then the third measure that they did was when they got someone on the cycle ergometer again, they were about to take a breath, and they made breathing in harder. So they made it harder to take a breath, or more, they increased the work of breathing. And what they sort of found out was if we made breathing easier, what they measured was an increased blood flow delivery to the legs, to the exercising muscles. If they made breathing harder, they saw a reduced blood flow delivery to the exercising muscles. So why would that be important for us? So let's say we're going on a run, or let's say we're going for a swim, or we're surfing, or whatever we're doing. If we're making breathing harder, right? If our breathing's challenged, if we've got poor technique, or we've got weak inspiratory muscles, let's say we're really stressed and we're doing this and we're just doing our upper chest breathing. So that's a big tax on the system. Our work of breathing is going to be increased. So then our performance will decrease if our work of breathing is high, because our exercising limbs won't get the blood flow that they require, or they will get reduced blood flow. So we'll see fatigue set in earlier. Does that make sense? Is this too much, Rich, or are you
Perfect.
Is this okay? Does everyone understand what I'm talking about here? I get a little nerdy on this sort of stuff. You can look at it as well if you want. Craig Harms, 1997. What we're talking about here is the metabo reflex. Okay, and what I'm going to do is do some practicals and show you guys how this actually works. So the respiratory metabo reflex, when we make breathing easier, we get more blood flow delivery to the exercising limbs. When we make breathing harder, we get less blood flow delivery to the exercising limbs. This is one of the primary mechanisms of change for why breath training bloody works. All right, this thing gets overlooked. The other thing that we mentioned last week was shortness of breath as well. So breath training improves shortness of breath. So when we've done this breath training, when we're breathing properly, when our let's say we're a kayaker, all right, and we're breathing like this, all right, that's really small breathing muscles. We've got our sternocleidomastoids, we've got our scalenes running down the side. So if you see someone like that, those neck muscles starting to twitch, that means that they're using the wrong muscles to take a breath in. What we should be seeing is the diaphragm moving, right? We should see that initiating the load. We do see this towards the end of inhalation, and let me show you what that sort of looks like. So it should be tummy first. So no movement here. And then as soon as this gets stretched, or this muscle gets to its end of range, then we start to see the chest filling up. And only right towards the end should we see these muscles here starting to activate. That's a full inhalation. That's pretty quick. And when I'm in the clinic one-on-one with someone, we go through that very methodically, and we train that with feedback. So we make sure that we go, okay, well, you can get to X number of liters with a diaphragm. Then from there to there, this is your chest wall. And then from there to there, this is your upper chest area. So anyway, this is kind of breathing technique stuff, but really what I wanted to focus on today was this idea around parasympathetic versus sympathetic mode. If we're breathing really stressed and really tight, we're going to be in this sympathetic mode. And just think about what type of breathing we do when we do get stressed. It's generally pretty fast, it's pretty erratic. You'll probably notice that you have a dry throat or a dry mouth. That's a sympathetic nervous system response. The rate reduces, the rate increases, so the number of breaths per minute increase. And then what actually happens is our rhythm, or our tidal volume reduces. So we take in less air each breath. So this is when we do get stressed, and this is when our sympathetic nervous system is activated. Shoulders might be tense, our breathing might be fully upper chest, and we don't really have that ability to shift into that parasympathetic without some technique. So we're going to do the sympathetic breathing now. So this is introducing stress into this environment. So if everyone's nice and comfortable, we're going to do it for 5 minutes. I'm going to pop my timer on here.
You want everyone sitting for this, Fletch?
It doesn't really matter. It's not really dangerous. So where everyone feels really comfortable. So this is a type of pranayama practice. Have you guys done any of that in the last few weeks? Yeah.
Pranayama.
Nasal stuff?
Yeah, alternate nostril breathing, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to introduce this. Actually, what I would like to do is I would like to see when we do the breathing practice, I'm going to add in a little bit of physical activity as well. So somewhere where you can just stand up as well. So I'm sitting on a couch, but I can jump up. I'll move you back a little bit. So what I'll be asking everyone to do is some pranayama.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to get you to stand up like that and in a squat position like that. Okay. So we're going to do this for 5 minutes. And what we're just going to notice, I want us to notice about our how dry our mouth is. That's something that I want us to focus on. I want to focus on with our body temperature as well. So we are going to be doing a little bit of exercise. So clearly we're going to be increasing our temperature as well. But if everyone just bears with me. So we're going to do pretty solid breathing in alternate nostrils. So it's going to be in one side, out one side, in the other side, out the other side. That's pretty typical pranayama practice. We're probably going to do it a little bit faster than what we've seen in the past. And we're also going to add in some breath holds and some squats, okay? So I think if we just get into it rather than me explaining it, we're going to do this for 5 minutes, and then we're going to sit down and we're going to explain what's going on, all right? So just hand on the, I usually put my first finger in my center of my forehead so that I can close one nostril and I can close the other like that. All right, so if we all start with closing the right nostril, leaving the left nostril open, all right, we're going to breathe in and out. And we're going to swap nostrils, in and out. And in, opposite nostril. I'm going to talk through you now. So what we're going to do is we're going to slowly increase and out and in, the right side. Out. In, left side. Out. In, right side. Out. In, left side. Out. Last one, in, right side. Hold. Hold. Keep holding for me. Squat position, keep holding. Ten seconds. All right, and down. Left side again, closing the right side of the nostril. Breathing in. And out. Right side, in. And out. Left side, in. And out. Right side, in. And out. Left side, in. And out. Two more, right side, in. And out. Left side, in. Hold. So I'm going to talk about what's going on here. So we're increasing our ventilation rate and we're also doing our breath holds. So we're making sure that we're recovering. Keep holding for me. Another 5 seconds. We're going to slowly increase these holds. Keep holding. Now we're going to a squat position. Lift into a squat. Hold the squat. Hold the breath. Our carbon dioxide levels are increasing now. We're going to start getting those triggers to take a breath. And then we're going to use our sympathetic breathing to recover. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Back down. Left side, in and out. Right side, in and out. Left side, in and out. Right side, in and out. Left side, in and out. Right side, in and out. Last one, left side, in. Hold on the inhale. Hold. Again, these holds should be very easy now because we're blowing off a lot of that carbon dioxide. Unlike last week when we were stressing and our muscles were tensing, this should be quite easy. We're going to push this in. We're going to push this hold a little bit. 3, 2, 1. Lift into the squat. Hold the squat. So again, this squat, what it's doing is it's producing carbon dioxide. It's asking more for the body, and we've got to work through that. It's not a big trigger for the system because we have been over breathing leading into this. 3, 2, 1. All right, down. Last one, right? In through the left side and out. In through the right side and out. Left side, in and out. Right side, in and out. Left side, in and out. Right side, in and out. Last one, left side, in and hold. Hold the breath. So we're going 20-second hold and a 20-second squat hold. This is our last one here. Hold. Hold. Again, shouldn't be any triggers for you guys at home. Jump into the squat position. Hold. So again, this is a sympathetic nervous system breathing, okay? We're going to check in with everyone after this, so keep holding. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Grab a seat. So that's just 5 minutes of that sympathetic nervous system breathing. You know, this is, again, what we talked about earlier, opposite to the parasympathetic rest and digest. This is like a small technique here that I use as a stimulus for me, either as a warm-up, also in a workout session as well, this type of activity. Can I get some feedback on that? Is anyone like feeling, obviously feeling a little hot and sweaty? Is anyone like a dry sort of mouth as well?
Well done. Prendendo da máquina para mamãe.
Yeah, so the dry mouth, that's a sympathetic nervous system response. Obviously the heat has been guys, but that's a sympathetic nervous system response as well. And just feeling right now.
I just unmuted everyone. Fletch, a bit of a background. I'm just going to give 1 second. Reverse.
I just want people to check in with how they're feeling right now. So what does the body feel like? What does the mouth feel like? What does the mind feel like? And what do the muscles feel like? Just remember how this feels. What we're going to do in the next session is the complete.
So what 1 sec, Fletch. I'm going to give me 1 second.
So we're doing a Zoom meeting as well for the guys that are on Instagram. So just a little bit what we're doing from last week, what we were working on was shortness of breath. And we were discussing the triggers for shortness of breath and how that relates to anxiety, and in particular, what's happening in the world today. Some people are sort of sending some information in. They're feeling good. They're feeling energized. Their heart rate's increasing. So this is not the type of breathing that we'd like to do if we were super stressed out. What we're going to go through now, and what we just sort of briefly touched on before, was when we make breathing harder or when we stress the system out, this sympathetic nervous system response, we actually see physiological changes within the body. So they've measured blood flow delivery to exercising limbs, and that reduces. So if we are super stressed out, or if we're breathing incorrectly, or our breathing muscles are weak, then we're going to have poor performance. But on the opposite side to that, if our breathing muscles are strong and we have good technique, we will improve performance just by changing breathing technique or breathing muscle strength. The other interesting thing they did was they measured the perineal nerve, so down here on the lower limb. So they using some microneurography techniques. They wanted to see what was happening at the level of the perineal nerve when we made breathing easier or we made breathing harder. And when we made breathing harder, they saw an increased sympathetic nervous system response way down here at the shank or the lower limb. So they saw the increase in sympathetic nervous activity, and what happens then is muscles contract, the blood vessels constrict, so reducing blood flow delivery to those limbs as well. So how we breathe has a physical change and a physical response within the body, even way down here at the lower limb. So by changing our breathing.
So we've got a few comments on the in the chat box there.
Yep.
A few questions.
Yeah, the hot and a little sweaty, got harder for me. I feel warmer. If you missed the last session, it's building up. Is this building up our body's ability to deal with stress? So that's a question. No. So this is introducing stress to the body. We haven't talked about any techniques in how to deal with it. So what can happen, what we do a lot with our practice is we introduce stress to the system, but we usually come into this with an objective measure. So let's say I do a breath hold and it lasts a minute. Then we add some stress into the body, and then we want to get to that minute again with stress on our body. So that's really, if we're looking at building our body, building our body's ability to deal with stress. That's how we go about it. All I'm trying to do here is show you the physical changes that can happen within the body when we change our breathing technique, and the research behind it, it's backed by research. Right? So we do have physical changes within the body depending on how we breathe. I felt the trigger to take a breath in the last couple, but feel my technique wasn't as good as the first two. So because we were over breathing, we were doing that fast, sort of like a Wim Hof breathing technique at the start. Wim Hof combined with some pranayama. We were reducing our carbon dioxide levels at the start. And so it wasn't a breath hold challenge. That's what we weren't doing just then. What I was trying to do is increase breathing rate. By closing a nostril, we increase the load to take a breath. So it's harder. If you breathe in fast with one nostril, it takes a lot of effort and you'll feel the muscles, where if you take that same volume and same rate through the mouth, there's no load on the breath. So by placing a load on the breath, by breathing through one nostril, that also increases the breathing load.
There's also another question there from Georgie that I think you might have missed, man. Above Sarah's one about the body.
Yep. If you missed the last session and are starting this week, what increments should the holds be? No, it doesn't matter. Yeah, we'll come back to the holding bit. It wasn't really a breath holding challenge. So all it was doing was showing you that this stimulus can change you into a sympathetic nervous system response, a little bit of a dry mouth, a little bit warm and sweaty, just by changing our breathing technique. We didn't have to add in those holds, but the holds I did we did Kai Lenny a couple of weeks ago. And if there's something that you guys want to write down, it's 20 seconds of breathing, 20 seconds of holding, and 20 seconds of squat position, holding your breath. And I would do that 5 times through.
Okay.
So that's a warm-up that I use. And like we've discussed, and we were with James Roberts last week as well, so he's an Olympic swimmer. Kai Lenny's a big wave guy. Breath practice is something that needs to be part of your everyday routine, or at least your weekly routine. And it has to be done for a long period of time for it to make a huge difference. You know, we do have those short-term effects, you know, like a Wim Hof method, or like we just did then, and we feel a little bit hot and sweaty. Like that's the short-term effect. Is that something that is like long-lasting for individuals? Is something that makes a difference for us long-term chronic health changes? We don't know. You know, this is something that it hasn't been researched, because the breath's only been properly researched, I guess, within the last 10 to 15 years. Really good research started coming out in the late 1960s, but that was really around carbon dioxide triggers. So it is a newer type of practice that we don't really understand physiologically the long-term benefits of doing a breath practice. I just know the big wave guys and the swimmers, you introduce this breath holding techniques. Let's say you're at the third 50 of a 200 meter freestyle or 200 meter fly, and you have to do a turn and you have to hold your breath for 7 seconds, but you've just done 150 meters at pace against the world's best. Then you've got to hold your breath for 7 seconds. That ability to hold their breath for 7 seconds on their third 50 turn, it's a huge stimulus for them. And it takes a lot of work for them to come out of that turn with not having a shortness of breath or a need to take a breath. And that's why a lot of the things that I work with, I measure. I want to make sure that the individual is doing the practice, and I want to make sure it's working for them as well.
So Fletch, can I ask a question there? Say on a level where we're not competing against the world's best, how does this translate to, you and I, myself, that, and other people that aren't in that competitive space? We're not necessarily kayakers. We might enjoy a little bit of sport, but, on a day-to-day life, where's the big benefits that we get from increasing our capabilities with breath?
Well, like last week we were talking about, so the question was, for the guys at home, how does, breath training relate to just the everyday human? Is that right, Rich? Yeah. So, just that practice we did right then. So if you, when I prescribe Wim Hof practice, because that's kind of like a Wim Hof practice, would be waking up in the morning, to energize the system. Would be for my students who are about to listen to me yabber on for an hour about the breath. I want to make sure that they're alive and they're warmed up and they're ready to go. I wouldn't prescribe that any other way. So what we did just then, that practice, that 5 minutes, people said they feel energized, that they feel warmer, they're obviously feeling a little dry in the mouth. If you're struggling to get out of bed and you need your morning coffee, this is like a morning coffee. All right. So this can energize the body and get you guys going. The second technique that we're about to do is it's like our sleep breathing that we did last week. So if you weren't in here last week, we did a sleep breathing technique. Everyone sleeps. So everyone has a challenge to get to sleep as well. So that's how breathing can relate to the everyday human as well. Would that answer your question, Rich?
Yeah, and the nerdiness in me wants to know what about the neurological benefits? Have they surely they must have done some studies there for that?
Like what sort of neurological benefits? What do you mean there?
The brain.
How your brain functions when you're breathing differently?
Yeah.
Performance. I'm less like brain function. I'm more like physiology. I want to know what happens to the body, to the muscle cells, how the body's ability to use carbon dioxide and oxygen change with breathing techniques. Yeah. I have seen, and I've glossed over a few papers regarding mental fatigue and mental acuity, but I haven't really dove into them at the moment. I know when we do some of our training in the pool, so we'll get people to swim and hold their breath and then dive under the water and then solve puzzles. And it's obviously challenging when you're out of breath or when you're short of breath or when you need to take a breath in to solve those problems. But really the way we look at it is, okay, can someone take their body, like what you've done, Rich, is your body is going through this change in this physiology, and your mind, you need to separate what's actually happening within the mind and within the body. So once you have techniques to do that, then your body can be going through stress. You can be in this situation now where you've lost your job and things are carrying on, but you know that you have this ability to get through it, and you've just got to be able to deal with it. It's like a meditation practice as well.
Thanks, mate.
So, we led in before about the metaboreflex. So that's that blood flow delivery. So when the breathing is bad, when the breathing's stressed, or when our breathing muscles are weak, we know that reduces our blood flow delivery to our exercising muscles. Hopefully we checked in with how our body was feeling, our mouth, our dryness. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the opposite. So this is a Buteyko practice. We're going to introduce this in slowly because it's quite challenging to get right. So Buteyko is a practice that I think was developed by chiropractors, and it was purely for the the treatment of asthma. So when you have asthma, it's a respiratory tract issue where triggers trigger the body or trigger the bronchioles to secrete mucus and then for them to constrict, and then that makes breathing harder. So that's the wheeze, is when the upper respiratory pathways start closing over, and it's really really hard to get a breath in. What happens a lot with asthmatic patients is, because of that anxiety around the breath, and shortness of breath is very much an anxious trigger, then we commonly see asthmatics overbreathing. And it's not just asthmatics that overbreathe. It's a lot of patients who have chronic anxiety or chronic stress as well. So they won't really know that they're overbreathing, but some common signs of overbreathing is a dry mouth, is yawning, or lots of sighing. So that's the body's need to say, hey, you need some oxygen. Even you are overbreathing, you're really short, shallow breaths. You're not creating a lot of ventilation exchange. You're just using this top bit here rather than, and this is where ventilation takes place. Ventilation doesn't take place here. Nothing happens here. It's just a tube to get air into the parts of the lungs that actually make a difference. So for a lot of asthmatics, a lot of overbreathing, and this technique was developed by, I think his name is Mr. Buteyko, and this was to get the body's used to CO2 triggers again. Last week we talked about CO2 being the number one thing that the body asks for, that the body's trigger is when it needs to take a breath. So as you hold your breath, CO2 levels increase, and then the body triggers to take a breath. So it's just getting the body used to that CO2 tolerance again. It's like what we do with the big wave surfers and what we do with the swimmers as well, the CO2 tables. But right now, all we're going to do is just completely slow down breathing and to a state where it's going to be very challenging for us to hold on to it, because you're going to want to take a big breath in. All right. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to close our eyes, and I'm going to count through here, and it's inhale and exhale. And it's with me. There's no pausing at the end of your exhale or the end of your inhale. There's no breath holding here. It's just purely about slowing the breath down. All right. So first of all, closing the eyes down and just sitting down, finding a nice comfortable spot. Grab a pillow. All right. And take a breath in for me, nice and slowly through the nose. 2, 3, 4, 5. And exhale through the nose. 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale through the nose. 2, 3, 4, 5. And exhale through the nose. 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale. We're going to slowly extend these inhales. 2, 3, 4, 5. And exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5. And inhale. 2, 3, 4, 5. And exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale. What I want you to think about now on the inhale, you go your own rate, so how much you breathe in, but you've got little tiny hairs on the inside of your nostrils. And exhale. I don't want them to move when you take a breath in or when you take a breath out. So you control the speed of that inhalation by noticing the hairs on the inside of the nose. I'm going to sit here for 1.5 minutes. So really slowing down. And I want you to feel that need to take a breath. It should starting to become on soon. So if you're slowly breathing in and slowly breathing out, and you're starting to get this need for air hunger, so those triggers that we talked about last week, if you're starting to feel that, then you're doing this practice right. So just sink back in with me again. So we're breathing in. And out. And in. And out. Feel the nose hairs, don't let them move. I want you to close one nostril now and do the same thing. So this is going to slow down our respiratory rate even further. So close the nostril, think about those nasal hairs, do not let them move. So slow down the respiratory flow so that we're not stimulating those nostril hairs. And again, I want you to feel that air hunger a little bit. It shouldn't be enough to stress the body out like we were doing last week with our exhale holds. If we push it too hard, then we're going to stimulate that sympathetic nervous system response. We just want to be in this parasympathetic mode. So holding a nostril, breathing in and out through the nostril and noticing the fine hairs on the inside of the nose. Don't let them move with your inhalation or with your exhalation. So we're completely slowing down the respiratory rate. What I want you to think about as well, though, is don't limit our tidal volume. So don't take small breaths in. I still want you to take normal breaths, even increase the breathing volume a little bit if you feel comfortable with that. What your body might want to do now is take a big breath in. It might feel like it needs that, but prevent that from happening. Because what we should be thinking about is those nasal hairs. Nice and relaxed. Swap nostrils if you want. So we've got another minute and a half here. I just want you to be thinking about now, so checking back in with the body and comparing what it's like now in terms of temperature, body temperature, and also the moistness of the mouth. What has changed with last time when we did our sympathetic breathing? Now that we've got our parasympathetic breathing mode on. So again, this is a Buteyko method. This is a method where we're asking the body to retain some carbon dioxide, slowing the system down. Like the last session, like some of the questions, would be the digestion breathing practice. So slow inhales, slow exhales. And the really good way to describe that is like we're doing now. So feeling the nasal hairs, slowing it down. Another 20 seconds. Ten. Okay. And coming back. So that there is a type of parasympathetic breathing mode. Again, it's got a name. It's called Buteyko. Let's just check in with people. Like, how's everyone feeling? Is there a difference between after the last session and now? Are people feeling a change in the body? Anyone? Rich, how are you feeling?
Yeah, good. I actually found that kind of more challenging than some of the breath hold stuff we've done, especially on that towards the end, that trying not to get a little bit of a suck in.
Yeah. The default, what we want to do is we want to go and take a big breath in and stimulate those nasal hairs. It's very challenging, you know, but we don't want to make it too challenging. This is something that you should know that if you haven't done a lot of CO2 tolerance work in the past, then that air hunger is going to be really vicious for you, and you're going to want to have to take a big breath in very quickly. You know, it's like our negative hold situation. So be careful with that. Like, don't. So some people are saying they have to take a deep breath after the single hold, so the body needed it. So that might mean that they might have some hyperventilation syndrome going on. It was really hard. Yeah, it's super hard because everyone is different and everyone's an individual. So someone's saying the exhale was more challenging. So that's right. If we think about what we discussed last week, so as soon as we exhale, our thorax or our chest cavity starts to reduce, and we know there's more triggers to take a breath when our thorax reduces. Okay. My like timing, the way I was breathing in and breathing out might have been too long for some people practicing at home. So find what that time is for you where there's not a lot of stress, okay, but there still is some feeling of air hunger. If there's no feeling of air hunger, you're not doing the method correctly, okay? So it's slowing down inhalation and exhalation, no pausing, okay? No pausing with inhalation and exhalation, but just really noticing how long you're breathing in for and how long you're exhaling for. Okay, and a way to do that on the run is, like I said, is just checking in with those nasal hairs, because that's something that you can do at the office desk. You don't have to have a stopwatch or whatever. So I'll just read out some of the comments here. Some saying the exhale was more challenging, failed miserably, was too long for me. It was really hard, but they're feeling like a nice wet mouth. So that's a really good signal that we're shifting into that parasympathetic mode. Rest and digest. You know, we know saliva is a really important enzyme in the breaking down of food, and that's a good, like, you know, half-assed way that we can measure if we're shifting into that parasympathetic mode. Okay, and compare that to our sympathetic mode. You know, where we were warm, we had a dry mouth, we were stressed. You know, the sympathetic breathing, it's useful sometimes, but it's not useful in a chronic situation. All right. So when we're hyperventilating, if we've got asthma, or if we have hyperventilation syndrome, or we're anxious, we just lost our job, whatever, and we're tense and we're only ventilating here, we're in that sympathetic mode, our digestion is going to be poor, stress levels are high, sleep's going to be terrible. All right. If we shift more to that parasympathetic mode, that breathing that we just did then, we should feel a wet mouth. We should be nice and slow with our breathing. Right? We should be controlled, and we should be, you know, getting some of that diaphragm activity and not a lot of that upper respiratory breathing pattern. You know, so I did want to bring a little bit of like research and science to this idea of parasympathetic versus sympathetic. You know, being blood flow delivery to the exercising muscles. That's one of the primary mechanisms of change that we see in athletes, but it doesn't need to be just in athletes that we deliver these changes to. And compared to last week as well, was sort of more our anxiety breathing. And again, if we're checking in that exhale holds that we did last week, let's do it now because we should be pretty nice and cruisy. So for those who weren't listening last week, we checked in with an exhale hold. So we were just taking a breath in all the way out and holding our breath until we saw the first trigger to take a breath. So if you finish the hold and you have to go like that, then you haven't listened to the body well enough. And we were talking last week about this is a really good way to check in with the body and how you're feeling, your arousal level or your stress level as well. So over the next week, let's do it a few more times, and everyone should generate their own number. All right, there's no right or wrong number for this. Just know that if it's a really short number and you're in a distress situation, then that makes sense. All right. If it's a really long number, then you might be really chilled out, and that might be you as an individual. Okay, so we're nice and relaxed now. So take a breath in and all the way out and hold. And I'm going to count. Listen to your body. Hold on the exhale. Listen to your body. Listen to the triggers. What's the first thing that asks to take a breath? Is it your neck? Is it your tummy? Is it your chest? 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. All right, I'll just leave it there. So people, if they've checked in last week and they had a number in mind, after that parasympathetic, we should see an increase in the number. Okay, we should feel more comfortable going through that after we've done our parasympathetic breathing. Any questions, queries, concerns with what we sort of did today? I did freestyle it a little bit, but I really did want to sort of check base with what we did last week and introduce these new 2 ideas.
If you've got a question, you can unmute yourself, but you also the stretch.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll spin around. So, so this is someone was asking before about diaphragm stretching, is that everyone seeing me? Yeah. So some of the diaphragm stretches that a lot of the free divers do, or a lot of the high level athletes do, is when they suck their tummy in, they start making that the diaphragm move, and all the tendons go crazy things. The way I stretch my diaphragm, and be careful with this one, particularly if you have a sore lower back. So the diaphragm is connected to L1, 2, and 3. So that's your lumbar vertebrae. So that's why a lot of poor breathing techniques and lower back pain, I do assess people's breathing when they do have lower back pain as well. So this is the position. So it's an up dog position. So it's like that. So you've locked the pelvis down, shoulders back, and then what I want you to do, I don't know if you can see that now, but then you breathe and you push your belly out. And as soon as I do that, my back clicks. So the first time I do it. So I'm locking my lower back down like this, and then I'm getting the diaphragm to push forward, okay, with a locked back. So it's a really nice diaphragm stretch. So I do that 5 times. So 5 big inhalations with the tummy breath in that up dog position. That's my diaphragm stretch. I know a lot of, like I said, other people do different things. You can do diaphragm releases by getting up underneath the ribs there as well. But I'll do it again. So in that up dog position, shoulders back. I'll move forward a little bit, so hopefully you can see my belly a little bit. Pushing the belly out in that inhalation.
Your hips are pressing into the floor, Fletch.
Sorry?
Your hips are pressing into the floor.
My hips, yeah. So I've got the front of my hips on the ground. Yeah. So they're not in a typical up dog position. They'd be elevated. So my hips are on the ground. So I want to lock that down. And my lower back's, I'm in a very lordotic posture. So it's held there like that. And it's all stable. And then my diaphragm's pushing out the front. So I'm breathing and pushing the tummy out.
There's just a question there from Trish. I don't know if you can see that, Fletch.
So I had a major injury last July. I fractured most of it. Fractured what? I'm back. Look, fractures, they heal within 12 weeks. So yeah, it's a really gentle exercise. So I'd encourage your spine. Yeah. So I'd encourage individuals to do that. Obviously it's a compromising position to be in. So if you've never done that position before, be careful jumping into that position. But certainly get in that position. And then what I want you to do, if you're in that position, you could maybe even just do this position on your elbows. Okay, that's just a good position. What you'll notice in that position though is your belly might be on the floor a little bit as well, but that's okay. But it's just not as a great a stretch, but for the first time you're stretching your diaphragm, it might be fine for you.
Awesome.
Cool.
Sweet, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's heaps of stuff like I've sort of mentioned. The way I operate is, we assess someone, talk about their needs, talk about their sport, and then give them their techniques so that it doesn't overwhelm them. Maybe I've overwhelmed people by talking about all this crazy stuff that's going on. But I'm just trying to give lots of different stuff, and small things will resonate with some people and some things won't resonate with other people as well. It's pretty challenging when you've got a diverse bunch of people. I love the questions. I love researching it. And Rich, on your question around, the mind and the breathing, I'll get back to everyone next week on some research around that as well. So it's my homework.
Awesome. And I was going to say, if people are interested and want to do more of this sort of stuff, can they just reach out to you directly, and you can do this stuff online with people as well as?
Yeah. So, we do, I started in pathology. So most of my patients early on in my career had asthma or had COPD or had anxiety, neck pain or lower back pain. I'm a physio by trade. And then I started introducing the breathing practice with those patients. I also spent 2.5 years in a sleep lab. So I owned a sleep lab, and, breathing and sleep is synonymous. So if people don't have their breathing right and they're sleeping poor or tired or fatigued all the time, that's something that we can work with as well. Now, most of my clients would be more of the athletic population, but I still have those skills from the normal population and from pathology as well. So just reach out. I've got the website, so Fletcher Techniques, or if you're on Instagram, Fletcher Techniques, you can be able to get in contact with me there. I've got plenty of time at the moment, like most people do. So yeah, just reach out, get in touch. If you got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And just, let me know. And hopefully we can continue just adding some new techniques to people. And like I said, some things will resonate with people, some things won't. So I'll continue to throw the proverbial shit and whatever sticks with people. That'd be fantastic.
In the name of your sign, fuck yeah. Also, just to throw it out there, I think for those that haven't touched on the other breathwork sessions, so great because we've got from Chelsea, we've got this full plethora of mix, and today it's that beautiful yang, really science, really proven powerful performance breath through to like the more esoteric practices, and then the Wim Hof practices as well. So I think everything, they just complement each other so beautifully, and I love that fact that we go and explore more of this stuff behind the scenes rather than just technique. That here's what's happening within the nervous system. I think that's invaluable. Personally. So yeah, big thanks, mate.
Well, I just want to know for me, when I first started into it, breathing wasn't as popular as it was. And then I got introduced into breath work, probably as a lot of people did through the Wim Hof stuff. And then I wanted to understand more what was going on there. And yeah, that was for me. I just started diving in that, and then the COPD and in respiratory muscle training, and that was sort of another sort of avenue that I shot off with. And like I said, there's so many different things and techniques, and then now I'm as a physiologist, I understand the physiology and how the body controls its signals and what goes on. Sorry, mate. Yeah. So once I understood how the body responds to breathing, then I look at anyone's practice, whatever they do, and I'm like, why are you doing that? That's my first question to them. They're like, oh, well, someone told me to do it, but why did they tell you to do it? What is the purpose for doing that? And if it has a purpose, then and someone feels something differently, and we can explain it, great. So yeah, that's the way I work.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go for birth.
Thank you so much. That was fun. I loved the start. I loved the squat sequence, and so that's a 20-second inhale, 20-second hold, and then a 20-second squat.
So 20 seconds of breathing.
Yeah.
So that should be recovery breathing. So you really should be focused, because as you do more and more of them, the squat holds we're talking about, they build. So they get more and more harder to achieve. All right. So if someone can do 5 of them to start, so 20 seconds of breathing, 20-second hold, and then a 20-second hold in the squat position, and then just repeat that. Yeah.
So that's good to do before sport. Like, for example, if I go for a surf now, hypothetically, do that on the beach before I paddle.
Mate, you're going for a surf, all right? Yeah. So do that as a warm-up. 20-second breathing, 20-second hold, 20-second squat hold, all right? And then do that 5 times through, and then, shred like Kelly Slater. Promise.
And then and don't lock your keys in your car, Rich.
Activate the brain so that way it won't happen as well.
Yeah. So thanks very much. And if there's any questions, queries, concerns, just reach out. Other than that, enjoy those sort of warm-ups there, and some understanding around parasympathetic versus sympathetic. know that we can change our body's rhythm, its rate, and how we're functioning by using our breath as well. And if anyone has any questions, let me know.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
See you next week.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.